How can you get more academic publications? Stick around and learn 7 strategies today on navigating academia. What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. J. Phoenix Singh, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Navigating Academia, your leading source for guidance on how to be able to advance your career in academia. As always, I appreciate the love, so please do like and share this video with your colleagues and your students. Subscribe to our channel, hit that bell, and comment below. You can follow us at the social media accounts at the bottom of the screen. So let's jump right in. Today we're going to be discussing how you can get more academic publications, be they peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, books that you're authoring yourself or editing, government reports, the list goes on. Publications are the coin of the realm, as it were, in academia. The more that you have, either getting deeper into a subject or on a variety of different subjects, the more influential you're going to be in that field. Obviously, not all publications are created equal. If you shoot for peer-reviewed journals, for example, that are higher impact, if you shoot for books that are not self-published and are not published by small publishing houses, but by the academic big dogs, the Blackwell-Wileys, the John Wiley & Sons, the Rutledge, the Pearsons, the list goes on in terms of leading academic publishers, you are going to get more quote-unquote bang for your buck in terms of how far a single publication will end up going. To tell you a brief story, I still remember 3 of my first publications, which came out when I was actually still in graduate school. The first article was published in a leading criminal justice journal, and I was very excited. Again, it was my first journal article, and I was just over the moon. Your first publication is a big deal. So I don't care if you look at other colleagues that you have or your supervisor if you're a graduate student, or look around and see people who are way far ahead in terms of their publication count. If you get that first publication, I want you to go out and party and treat yourself and do whatever makes you happy, okay? Take that long bath, take that vacation that you've been dying to be able to take. Anything, because it is a big deal. And if you've just gone through that, I really want to give you huge kudos and congratulations, because it's a really big deal. So I remember after my first one came out, this is over 10 years ago now, and I was so excited, I was so thrilled. And what happened was that when the piece came out, I of course was tracking that thing like a hawk, seeing how many people were reading it. And at the end of that year, it was ranked as one of the top 10 most read journal articles in that journal. And I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, and but it was only read something like 700 times, which on the face of it seemed like a lot to me. I was like 700, wow. But the next publication that I did that ended up coming out was in a higher impact factor journal. The first impact factor for the first journal was between 1.5 to 3, if I remember correctly. The second had an impact factor between 10 to 15, I recall. And in terms of how soon there were, 700 reads, we're talking about, within a month. And for the third publication, which was in a journal, it was General Medical Journal, that had a massive following and massive exposure in terms of what it provided me. We had thousands of views literally within one day of the thing coming out. There were press releases about it, people were buzzing about it. This was a different beast, so not all publications are created equal. Now, there's a number of reasons, though, that you would want to publish and get more publications than whatever you have right now. Number one is obviously to be able to increase your visibility in the field. No matter what field you're in, whether you're in English Lit or you're in forensic psychology, the more publications that you have, provided they're of good quality and appearing in the right places, this is going to really increase your brand awareness amongst colleagues, and depending on where you're publishing, in some cases in the general public. For example, my work's been cited in Washington Post, I've been quoted in People magazine, these sorts of things. In terms of the general population, far more people would know about my work from these sorts of things than me publishing in, a high impact medical journal even, right? So the second is obviously to establish yourself as a thought leader in the field. There's really nothing worse than being someone who essentially when they speak or when they write, you're just regurgitating the ideas of other people. Rather, if you have your own kind of seminal ideas that you can develop through the publishing process, putting something new and contributing something new, or even repackaging things that have been done in the past, and finding new ways to communicate it to a new or larger audience, this is just the name of the game. You can really establish yourself as someone who is kind of a principal educator or, again, a principal thought leader in the field. And that only spells out positive things for your future. The third is to be able to get more professional opportunities. And here I'm talking about things like being able to get on as ad hoc journal reviewers, getting on editorial review boards, getting on, local or national task forces, being able to get more grants because, again, you're perceived as a leader in the field, especially if you've got some high-impact stuff out there or some books with leading publishers. It really establishes you as kind of one of the elite within the field. So you're going to get a lot more opportunities. The more publications I got when I went from having 5 to 10 publications to having 50 to 70 publications, my life completely changed in terms of the opportunities that were pushed out to me. After a while, you're going to be able to say no to things, which is kind of very exciting to have so many things come your way that you can actually start being a little bit more picky and choosy. And that takes some time, but really the thing to focus on is the quality of that work. And finally, obviously you want to get promoted and you want to get opportunities for generating more revenue above and beyond whatever your income is from being in academia, insofar as, your assistant, associate, full professorship. If you're an adjunct, that's super cool, right? There's so many different ways to get involved in academia, but you want to make sure that you're moving up the ladder, that you can justify when you go and ask for a raise, when you go and, ask to be able to, be placed on committees within the department, or to be, a chair or an associate chair, to go up for those kinds of positions. You really need to make sure that you've established yourself, and the best way to do that in academia is through publications. So how exactly can we get more publications? Well, there's 7 different strategies that I want to discuss in this video. The first one is just grind. And I'm talking about here doing it yourself, right? Keep your head down and run. I remember when I was in elementary school, I was a super overweight kid, and it was really hard for me to run the mile run. This was really hard for me. I would be so winded, I would hyperventilate, it was so tough. And I had to do 4 laps around this track that we had in my elementary school. And let me tell you, the first 3 laps were hard enough, but that 4th lap was killer. And what I found was that the way for me to get through it was to close my eyes, put my head down, and basically just kind of go all out. And by the time I was done with the thing, I was so proud of myself, but I was spent. And it would take me at least a couple of days to be able to get over that and kind of, get back on the wagon of exercising again and being able to participate in my physical education, my PE class, etc. So it can be really difficult to do everything yourself. When you're in a really unique situation, so like for me, for example, I was basically a cohort of 1. I was essentially the only one doing the forensic psychiatry work that I did when I was in the Department of Psychiatry at Oxford for my first doctorate. It was really challenging. I had a couple of students who were older than myself. They were finishing up when I was really coming in. And that was really tough for me because I knew that I was really going to have to grind through this thing. And then when I did my postdoctoral fellowship, a couple of mentors that I had who were tremendous people and tremendous academics, for personal reasons, ended up getting amazing jobs elsewhere. And because of that, I was really operating more kind of solo again. And I had to grind these things out, find ways to be able to kind of make it work. And at first, I gotta be honest with you, it was really lonely and it was really hard, and I had to teach myself more than I really wanted to have to teach myself. But in the long run, it was great. It was a great decision. One thing that one of my postdoctoral mentors told me, he was a great mentor to me, and he told me, Jay, one thing that's really important is that you ensure that not only do you have publications with other people, but you have some solo publications where it's only you. And based on that guidance and also these unique circumstances I was in, I ended up publishing a variety of kind of, solo publications. And one or two of these in particular have become kind of staples in terms of my work in my little baby field of forensic mental health and corrections. And so because of that, I've again gotten a lot more opportunities because people have seen that I am capable of, writing high-level publications by myself, that I'm capable of kind of taking projects from beginning to end alone. So there's a lot you can do if you're just grinding this thing out by yourself. Strategy number 2 is to network and collaborate. It is such a pleasure in academia to be able to get to know other scholars who are just as passionate as you are, especially other younger scholars or other scholars who, they have been in the field for quite some time. They've recently discovered your niche, or they're the big dogs of the field who you've always wanted to work with. And those guys are getting crazy numbers of opportunities where they can't take all of them, even if they want to take all those opportunities. So if you can find ways to be able to collaborate with them, to be able to, especially if you're new at this, if you're new at publishing, you can learn so much from people more established than you. And really the folks that you want to focus on are not only working with the big dogs, you want to focus on people who usually are between the ages of 35 to 55, who are still, at the end of early career and then mid-career, or even later mid-career, right? Where they essentially are still making that name for themselves. They are in hustle mode. They're working on the grants, they're working on the contracts, they're working on everything you can imagine, going to the task forces, giving the trainings, flying around, becoming better and better and better known. At the end of the day, you want to hit your star to some of these individuals and you want to learn from them and become that star yourself for the next generation and make it something where it is a reciprocal arrangement. The people that you're getting to know, the worst thing that in terms of a reputation you can get is as somebody who's a moocher on somebody else's hard work, okay? Even if at the end of the day you end up being the gopher on some projects, meaning that you are the workhorse even though you're not the first author or the supervising author on that piece, to be able to sometimes just get into that team or get into that clique, because academia is super cliquey. Oh my gosh. It's really kind of worth it to be able to kind of, show that you can really pull your weight and give other people opportunities. You don't have to be kind of scrounging around asking other people in a needy or clingy fashion, hey, do you have anything that I can work with? I'm really, trying to get more publications. Do you have something I can join in on? On the contrary, a great way to be able to get invited on things yourself is to extend opportunities. Go to people you're interested in working with who maybe you have never even met in person sometimes or never even spoken to, but you really respect or enjoy their work. Reach out to them. It is very flattering, I can tell you as an academic, to be able to have somebody come to you and say, hey, I really enjoy your work. I'd love to find a way to work together. Here's a data set or here's a general, paper or a review that I'm working on. Would you be interested in co-authoring this thing with me? And this is a great way, again, to be able to get into different inner circles, because if all you do is sit around and wait for the opportunities, I can almost guarantee you that they're not going to come. You need to be your biggest advocate. Also, just going places, right? If you happen to be in town where there's a colleague that you'd really like to meet, you're on vacation, you're someplace for a conference, write to them, leave a voice message. I know that especially for millennials like myself, it's like picking up a phone. Oh my gosh, but just do it. Don't think too much about it. You're not gonna do it, right? People really appreciate that, and simply grabbing a cup of coffee or something, even if the person's really well known, provided that it's done tactfully and respectfully, you're gonna come across well. Remember what I always say, guys, it's not what you say and what you do, it's how you say it and how you do it. And you can do this, trust me. Strategy number 3 is to make use of existing data sets in exchange for co-authorship. So what I mean here is that if you're in a scientific area, so for example, you're in psychology or medicine or sociology or anthropology or any of these other areas where data sets will already exist, This is an area where if you end up reading, let's say, a series of papers that someone who you would like to collaborate with, they've recently come out with it, or let's say within the last 5 years. I wouldn't go back further than that unless it was a really famous data set, a really famous study. It's like in forensic psychology, there's like a few data sets that are like super famous, people go back to all the time and do new analyses on. But especially if it's a data set that has not been mined, meaning that it's not a data set where there have been 1,000 papers published on it, there's been maybe 1 to 3 publications. If you can essentially contact those individuals who conducted that study, and it's usually going to be whoever the corresponding author is on, whatever those seminal studies are, especially if there's only a few of them. At the end of the day, if you go to them and say, I loved those papers and the data set is something I'm very interested in, because I think that if you did such and such set of analyses or tested such and such hypothesis using the data you already have, that could make for a very innovative idea for a publication. I would love to be able to collaborate with you, even conduct the analyses myself, draft out the methods section and the results section, and also put together a rough draft of maybe the intro and the discussion for you to be able to take a look at, and we can work on that as a paper together. Obviously, it's something where, and when I say obvious, maybe it's not obvious, but if you have a data set as a scholar and someone else comes along and says, let me do analyses on it, as much as I would love to say that academia is this, incredibly giving field and everybody wants to share with everybody else, sometimes that's not the case, and you really got to hedge your bets. And obviously, if somebody's done a really high quality job at putting a data set together, it would be good to be able to have a publication with them, right? Build that network, collaborate. So to be able to say, I'm willing to do the gopher work, I'm willing to put the work in, you obviously, hopefully make the arrangement before starting anything. This is like a marriage, right? Where you want a prenup. It's the same sort of an idea. You want to make sure that the law has been laid down and you say, I'm going to do all this work and then I'm going to be the first author, right? And you will be the supervising author or the second author, whatever you want, right? Whatever you prefer. Authorship order, I'll do another video on for you guys. Because there's all sorts of, rules for different fields in terms of, and depends on the country, in terms of what authorship order means. But if you're doing all the work and drafting the paper, and this is your baby, you should be the first author. However, the colleague who's contributing, or colleagues who are contributing the data set, should be on that paper as well. It could be argued, especially if you're working very closely with them. Now, if it was something where this publication came because there was a data set that was built over years and years and years, but it was kind of put out there and made publicly accessible to the point where you can get it and you run the analyses and all by yourself without needing permissions or anything like this, then there's really no need unless you want to be able to reach out to the developers of the data set and say, would you like to be co-authors? Otherwise, it's kind of understood that that database is publicly accessible and can be used for your research purposes. Now, in some cases, depending on how sensitive the data is, one of two things can happen. Either they can de-identify the data and send it to you, depending on what your regulations are, like HIPAA regulations in the US, depending on the country that you're in. Sometimes there's unique state regulations in terms of privacy and encryption. Got to take a look at that. But especially these days, because the privacy laws are kind of evolving all the time and becoming a lot more comprehensive. So really stay abreast of the latest developments on that. But it could be something where they even expect you to physically go to them and conduct the analyses on a specific computer in a specific location. This happens with the government sometimes. I've had colleagues who have to go to National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, and sit at a computer, sometimes even being supervised, just to conduct the analyses, right? They don't let you take the data set or anything like that back. And so this is very important that you kind of find out, if you decide to use this strategy, what are the implications, practically speaking, of doing that? So that's strategy number 3. Strategy number 4 is to barter your skill set. Now, in other videos and in this one as well, you're going to hear me say the same thing, which is to develop a very unique skill set that very few people in your field have. For example, if you're in an area of scientific research where, you're dealing with something like null hypothesis statistical testing, so p-values and, ANOVAs and regression analyses and big data predictive analytics and neural network models and all this good stuff, if you can develop a really unique skill skill set. So for example, most people know how to do in scientific research z-tests and t-tests and one-way ANOVAs and these things, or even something like linear logistic regression. But if you can get really good at a particular area, yeah, people know regression, but do they know, like HLM, like hierarchical linear modeling? It's very unlikely. Do they know something like Akaki and Bayesian information criterion? It's very unlikely in terms of predictive modeling and building modeling strategies. These are things that if you become an expert in that area, trust me on this one, if you put it out there such that people know, and again, there's very discreet ways to do that, presenting at conferences, even making something like YouTube videos, right? So people kind of know, you can do it in a tutorial fashion. And of course, people talk. If you let your colleagues know that, you're looking for some data sets or some collaboration opportunities to use these really unique skills that you have, this is something where, you keep knocking on enough doors and being grateful in the hallway while waiting for those doors to open, good things are going to happen. And again, doesn't have to be stats. You can have a really unique area of content expertise. Let's say, for example, that you are in art history and you are really, really deep into surrealism. That is your area, and you're a big Giorgio de Chirico fan, for example, and that is just your guy in that field. It is a situation where you developing that content expertise can make it so that if somebody else is coming along writing a paper on surrealism and wants a Giorgio de Chirico expert, they're gonna know your work, right? And they can reach out to you. Just make sure that, really, I do recommend, in addition to having your university website, having your own personal website where you can kind of post your own blog work, etc. Make sure you consult with any affiliations you have. So if they want you to put any disclaimers in there, like, my views do not represent those of University of X, whatever, that's perfectly fine and totally understandable, right? But having kind of your own space where you can express your creativity, people can find you, contact you, etc., in addition to any affiliations you may have with an institution or organization, it's a great idea, and I do recommend doing that. If you don't have a lot of money, that's okay. Build something with Wix or Squarespace, whatever it is. You don't have to do a custom build on WordPress or any of these other platforms, although I do recommend using Custom Developer and WordPress. Strategy number 5 is to become the guest editor of a special issue of an academic journal. Now, I'm going to make a specific video only on that, and I'm going to link it in the description below because it is a very specific procedure you go through to make that happen, and you're going to have to hustle to make that thing happen. But it can really open up a lot of opportunities to people to allow people to see you as a thought leader in your field. Now, when you become the guest editor, it's like you take over the journal for one issue that's on a very niche topic. But when that happens, you can invite colleagues, who you're interested in working with. It's a great networking opportunity for people you've never met. Again, that idea of giving them the opportunity to be able to contribute something. You're giving them the opportunity to be able to submit to a special issue, and the odds of getting published in a special issue are significantly higher, provided that, again, it's a high quality work, it passes peer review, etc. But that special issue is going to be only for articles on that topic. And because of that, if you get an expert on that topic, they're going to want to be a part of that because they also know that they're going to be in good company. Probably the other people who are contributing to that issue are going to be the other leaders in the field. And of course, people want to be around other people who shine bright because it's going to reflect well on them, right? And when it comes to getting more publications as well, in addition to the networking opportunities and such, if you have your own articles that you want to submit for peer review, I always recommend, if you do that, have a co-editor. You should not be submitting your own articles for publication and then acting as the determining, individual, the gateway as to whether that piece gets published. It's not ethical, it's not fair, don't do it. So always choose a co-editor if that's the situation. I've done this in the past myself on a special issue with a colleague that I respected very, very much. This was during my postdoctoral fellowship. We worked great together. The special issue was a wonderful one that's highly cited in my little field. but it was a great experience, and I ended up getting 2 publications out of it, right? And it was a lot faster in terms of the publication process because the people who were doing the peer reviews were folks that, again, were experts in this little area and were thrilled that somebody was doing a special issue on it. And because of that, they wanted, the stuff to come out if the work was good. So instead of it taking 2 weeks, 3 weeks, up to several months to be able to get the reviews in, most of them were done within, by a week and a half in without me having to, hassle anybody for them to get back to me, which was a real blessing. So not only can you get the stuff published, and again, it's not a definitive thing at all, still very, very high level peer review you have to pass. But given that it's a special issue on your topic of interest, it's certainly something where the odds are higher than if you're submitting to a random journal. Strategy number 6 is to edit a book. Now, I say this instead of writing your own book. If you write your own book, so this is like the first book that I did, for example, I was the third co-author on it. It was a great opportunity, learned so much through the process. But when you're writing a book like that, you don't take responsibility for an individual chapter. You wouldn't say, oh, chapter 3, okay, I wrote that. Chapter 6, okay, I wrote that. No, it's just that, all the co-authors are authors on the book. That's what happens. But if it's an edited book, that means that every single chapter is going to have a different author or set of authors. So if all you're trying to do is to increase your publication count, one thing that you can do is you want it to look like you've got a lot of stuff on your CV. I get it. So in addition to citing the book, under a book chapter subsection, you can write out in whatever format, whatever convention you're supposed to be using in your field. For me in mental health, it's American Psychological Association 6th edition. So that's what I would use, is I would use my APA handbook and I would cite every book chapter that I'm involved with because they're individual publications. That's how they're usually considered. So if you do edit a book, right, and you want to get involved with as many of those chapters as possible, then you can talk to the authors of those different chapters and say, how could I contribute a significant enough amount to be able to justify co-authorship here? Because if all you're doing is just doing the basic, not peer review per se, because it's not a peer-reviewed journal, it's a book, right? It's an edited book. But somebody's got to go through and give all the feedback and these things. But that's your job as an editor. That does not justify you being a co-author on that chapter. You got to do something really unique. And if you can make a unique contribution that's substantial enough to not be like, oh, he just gave it a read and gave some suggestions. If you can do something really unique, draft a section, conduct some analyses, etc., trust me on this one, it's going to justify authorship, and instead of just having, your name on the cover of the book, you can get your name on some chapters within it as well. And again, do not abuse your power. It's very important that you be ethical. Word travels fast in academia, and it is a small world. So just make sure that you're, staying above board on everything, because you want to be somebody who's known for your integrity. Finally, strategy 7 is a strategy that I do not recommend, which is essentially writing salami articles. And when I say the word salami, what I mean is that you've got the same data set, and you essentially, instead of writing maybe 1, 2, or even 3 articles using that data set, but it shouldn't be something where you're writing the different articles just to get publications. And this is what a salami is. Salami articles is basically where you keep publishing over and over and over again on the same data set in different journals, and essentially hoping and praying that they don't choose the same peer reviewers, or that the editors don't know each other, or associate editors don't know each other and they're not communicating, which oftentimes they are. But it's going to make you look really bad if, yes, in a given year you had 10 publications. But when people look at it, it's because, okay, here was the full sample, and then here was the sample in the second article, which was only men and women, and then here was the third, where it was only people over 18 and under 18. A lot of people would scratch their heads and say, wait a minute, it's the same analyses or the same hypotheses being tested on different subgroups. It's one thing if it's a totally new set of analyses using different hypotheses, trying to prove something different, etc. But you really got to stay abreast of that and make sure that when you're kind of putting the work into these publications, you're making unique contributions and ones that people aren't going to kind of, raise their nose on if they end up, catching wind of this. And trust me, people will catch wind of it. Alright y'all, thank you so much for watching this episode. I want to hear from you in the comments below. How many publications do you have so far, and what strategies are you adopting to try and build that base even more? Remember what I always say, guys. Don't worry if you've built castles in the sky. That's where they're supposed to be. Now build foundations underneath them. I want you to dream big, and then I want you to hustle to make this happen. Okay, I love Thoreau. It's a Thoreau quote, right? Not the hustle part. I would have loved if Thoreau talked about hustling. That would be pretty awesome. Don't forget to like and share this video with your colleagues, subscribe, and follow us on social media. If you're interested in one-on-one career mentoring, see a consultation call with me via the website below, and let's see if we can really maximize your impact in your field, get you generating incremental revenue to be able to even further cushion yourself financially. And, let's just see what we can do. I think it'd be pretty exciting to work together. Signing off, everyone. Have a great day, and remember to get out there, take chances, and be your best self. Thank you so much for stopping by, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here as always. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more in this series on navigating academia, please click on one of these links over here to be able to view more original content. I hope to see you there.